Okay, so we're going to make an original Xbox port of a game that I've been a huge fan of since I bought the game back for Windows back in the 90s, and that is the game Heart of Darkness. Now, Heart of Darkness was a game that was developed by Amazing Studio that was, authored by Eric Chahi, and Eric Chahi was the developer of the brilliant game Another World, or Out of This World as it was known in North America, and this was kind of the follow-up. It is a excellent game in its own right. It came out for the PC and the Sony PlayStation, and because it has an open source kind of engine rewrite that was developed by Gregory Montoir, I figure why not port this to the original Xbox. I get a lot of requests from people asking, hey MVG, how do you port things to different systems, consoles? So what better way to show you guys how I port something than kind of walk you through the whole process. So this is going to be a bit of fun. I know the game has been ported to like the Vita, the Wii, the Switch, so the source code should be pretty clean and easy to work with. So let's go ahead and download the code. And let's get started on this. Now, actually, before I pull the code down, the first thing I want to do is go into my Xbox development environment, and I'm going to create a new project. And I'm going to call it HODE is the Heart of Darkness engine. I'm going to call it HODE X because, it's the Xbox. We always put the letter X on the end of everything. We'll make it an empty project and finish. So we have our HODE X. Now there should be a folder called HODE X in here. So now what I want to do is download the source files. No, just download. And open that. And what I'm going to do is now just grab all these files and throw them into my, throw them into my source folder here. Now in Visual Studio 2003, this is the Xbox SDK. I'm going to add, I want to add existing items. I want to add my CPP files. So let's grab all those and add them in. And let's see what happens now. This is not going to compile. We're going to have to fix some things, but what I normally do is I'll take the first file, whatever it is on the top of the list, and just right click and compile it and see what happens. As you can see, we've got one error off the bat. So what is the problem? It's missing this file, standard int, which I know does not exist on the original Xbox. So what I'm probably going to do is say if not defined Xbox, just ignore it. Actually, I have another idea about that may get us further. Yeah, I kind of figured that was going to happen. So it's blowing up because of these values here. So the Xbox doesn't know anything about uint16. Doesn't know anything about these types, and that's what standard int provides for us. So what we probably want to do is roll our own standard int file that we just put in the folder that has all these definitions. So let's grab one from somewhere else, and what I normally do here is I'll just Google standard int.h and just find and see what makes the most sense. Let's take a look at this one here. This one looks pretty good to me. I'm going to work with this one. I think it should be okay. but we don't really care about any of this stuff. We really just want the defines here. But before I do that, I think what I'm going to do first is, so we've got intern. Let's see what this is actually defining. So it's, yeah, defining intern. So in intern, I think what I'm going to do is do something like this. If def Xbox, we want to include XTL, which is kind of the standard Xbox definition header file for everything Xbox. Let's see what happens. It's still going to blow up on standard int, but let's see what it does now. It's probably still not going to compile right, so we still need to provide standard int. So I'm going to basically grab this and in the header files I'm going to say add new item, and I'm going to call it standard ints.h. I'm going to put all this stuff in there, and what I'm going to do is just remove these things. I don't know if they're actually needed for anything. Now let's see what happens now. Still can't find it because it needs to be changed to, that's kind of the standard path that it's trying to look for. So let's do this. Actually, let's try this. So this is telling us look for standard int in the local path. As you can see, it found it. So let's compile this, and that's still not looking good. Yeah, this is probably something I want to simplify. I don't want this to be that complicated. Don't care about this word extension at all. Let me find something a little simpler than this and see what I can do. I probably have it in another project somewhere. Let's go into development and just search for standard int. What do I got here? I guess the other thing I could look for is types.h or something like that. Let's see what this is telling us. That's not what I want. Let's see. Let's grab this. I think that's probably about as good as we're going to get, and then throw it in here. And let's do this. U16T. U32T, U64T, and this is just going to be int 8T, int 16T, int 32T, and int 64T. I'm just not going to ignore the floats for now. Let's see what this does now. Hopefully it should get further. Okay. Okay. So it's complaining about standard in because it's trying to find it in kind of the kind of global include path. So I think what I'm going to do is add an additional include directory for dot, which is the current folder. I think that should resolve it. It doesn't. So we'll just do this if def xbox else and if so this uses SDL and we actually have SDL, so that won't be a problem. But the problem that we have is that we're using SDL 1.2 and this is SDL version 2, but we can certainly get around that. That's not a deal breaker. We should be able to work around that without too much trouble. So we have a couple of things going on here. So the video CPP file compiled, and then this file Andy did not. Now I guess the question is, do we need Andy in the game? So one thing that I like to do is, if we go to our development and then our Hodex file or folder, there should be a make file which tells us what it's actually building. So these are all the files that it's building. So yeah, I mean, all the CPP files look like they need to be defined, which is fine. So we got to figure out this this packed name here. So let's see where packed is being defined. So what I do is just a find in files for packed, and then I'll just give it the folder. So let me just remove that. Let's find the Hodex folder. So as you can see, that's where packed is being defined. Now in Windows, it is a Pragma pack, I believe. So that is not going to work, at least in Visual C++ or Visual Studio. That is a GCC directive. So we'll need to do something like this, where we say if Xbox else. I'm actually just going to leave it blank, I think. Because that is not going to work for us with Visual C++. We need to do Pragma packs on those. Let's see if that gets us any further for now anyway. It does. And then benchmark, it does. So we're starting to compile these files. But obviously we still have a bunch of errors here, but we'll figure this out. Let's go from the top. So SDL we know about, we can deal with that. There are a couple of warnings. This is a template issue. Well, I guess let's deal with SDL first. And try to address those issues. Now, because this is using SDL2 and the original Xbox only has SDL 1.2, we're going to have to rewrite these functions. So essentially, we need to make a couple of changes here. So let's focus on the system SDL2 file first. Well, actually, let's come back to that last. Let's proceed and fix these other issues. So this is a template error that we have. Template parameter T is ambiguous. Could be int or int32. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. So make this int32t. I think that should help. It doesn't. Let's see what's going on here. See declaration of clip. So let's take a look at priority current. In 32, yep. And sample priority. That's an int 8, okay. Could be int or int32. I mean, we could do something like this. Try to cast it. What does that do for us? So this is sound. It doesn't help. Oops. Templates are always a pain in the ass for me to work with. Let's see if this gets any further. Could be int or int32. Let's go back to our standard int file. Okay. I think this is the problem. Does that help? It does not. See declaration of clip. We say we do this and then cast the whole thing. Or does it have to be int and not const? Nope. So it doesn't like that one. Doesn't like that one. Template parameter T is ambiguous. Is that right? It is not. Let's see. Sometimes you just need to Google. Which is exactly what I'm going to do. Now remember, this is VS 2003. It's very old. I think that should do it. Yep, it fixed it. So I guess we just got to do it for the remainders. It's just one of those things where there's assumptions being made. This is a very old C++ compiler. It doesn't always play nice with kind of modern code. Alright, so let's see where we are now. So we know STL is a problem. We'll come back to that. And okay, so we've got these scalars. I'm probably going to ignore those for now. This XBR scalar, I'm probably just going to get rid of. I'm not going to delete the file. I'm just going to say exclude from build for now. And I'm actually going to exclude the STL2 file from build as well, because we know that's going to cause a problem. So let's see where we are now. Alright, so snprintf. I know for a fact this doesn't exist on the original Xbox. I've had many times where I've had to deal with this before. Just to make this really simple, let's go ahead and do this. Just going to try find a header file I can put this in. So let's go into where I did ifdef xbox. Let's do this. We're going to say define as sprintf. It's not the best idea, but it will get us further. Compile. So now we've got casting errors. Oh yeah, that's not going to work for us. We need yeah, we can't just do that. Let's try this instead. Let's try this instead. SNPrintf, yeah. I think what I'm probably going to do... let's try this actually. I feel like I've had these... SNPrintf. I've had these things come up so many times in the past. It seems like it's just the same stuff that you always fix. So there is a V, there is this, and then there is a SNPrintf. Interesting. Aha, okay. Maybe that's all I needed to do. Yep. I think that's what I need to change. So let's go back to our file. Which is back on intern, so I was almost correct, but not quite. Let's try that now. Okay, it seems to get further. All right, getting closer. We have 24 errors. So we've got some definitions here that the compiler does not know about. But the first thing I'm going to fix is we've still got more of those template errors. So let's fix those. So parameter 2 is int32 to int. So let's go take a look at the definition. So I'm just going to change that to int32t. What does that do for us? Actually cleans up quite a bit, which is good. Alright, so let's fix the int32 min and max definitions. Let's see. Let's just grab all these. And let's grab max. In 32 max, right there. That should satisfy that. As you can see now, we only have one warning. Alright, we're getting closer, guys. Alright, we still have a bunch of errors. We have 5 errors and 71 warnings. So let's focus on the errors. Okay, another SDL error. I'm going to come back to that. That's a warning. Bunch of warnings. Fatal error, dir ent. This is another one that does not exist on the original Xbox. Dir ent was not a thing because everything was in absolute paths. There was no relative paths on the original Xbox. So this is always something that you just have to kind of just fiddle with and change around. We'll come back to that a little bit, but let's look at this FS Android. Because this is not an Android version, then we don't need this file. So I am going to remove this from the project. Do not need it. And then we have file IO, which looks like standard file IO type stuff. And it's blowing up on sysparam.h. That's because that does not exist on the original Xbox. I think that should compile. It does. Okay, so we only have a couple of things we got to address. So what's this? Round identify not found. So that must be a round function, I guess. I wonder what that is in C. Rounding functions. So it's in math.h. It's interesting why. Yeah, there's math.h. Can't find round. Let's try that. Seal. Yeah, it's got to be either, I'm assuming it's either seal or floor. Let's put a to-do there for now. Okay, so we only have a couple more errors here, so let's get rid of this. Actually, let's change this a little bit. If def Xbox else, all this stuff, because none of this stuff is on the original Xbox. So where it's doing a directory entry, where it's listing the files, we'll need to change this. For now, I'm just going to say, if not defined, Xbox. And we'll come back to it. Max path length, that should be 255. String case compare. Now, I wonder why that doesn't exist, or it's complaining about that. It seems a little odd. Why would it complain about that? String case compare. Let's do what we just did previously and find in files on other projects, because I feel like that's something that we've used before, and I already saw a clue there. I'm going to stop this. Looks like I just do a string compare. String case compare is a string compare. Yeah, it makes sense. Not I guess the best idea. Actually, I think I like this one better. Comp. I think that's a better solution. Okay, so we're down to stl.h. All right. So let's go to main. Now, one thing that's interesting is I don't actually see any calls to STL here at all. So I think we can just get away with saying of course none of these things exist on the original Xbox. Okay, so it's complaining about 3p any.h and any.h. I don't even know what that is. I didn't think I saw that in the source files. So I wonder what that actually is. Looks like some external library, which makes sense. There's probably other libraries that are required for this to work. Let's take a look at the okay, that is just for the game. Is there anything about the source code? What do we have here? So as you can see, there's additional dependencies on some other things, libxbr and any.h. I'm assuming it's for any files and stuff. So How do we work around this for now? For now, I think what I'm going to do is probably just comment those sections out. But you can see here that's where we're actually dealing with the config. So let's bring in the ini-h stuff. If we can actually locate it. This stuff right here, I think. I want to say it's this. Simple INI parser, good for embedded systems. It doesn't look like that. It's that actually. Seems like it's a little different. Let's go ahead and add this. So he had a folder called 3P, and then we had an, I believe it was, all right, so let's go back. So let's put the header file in there. I have no idea if this is the right thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the include path to be the current path. Now, why doesn't that work? Compile. That would be that. Oh, I see. Had the wrong path. Let's grab this and bring it up here. Here we go. Okay, string case compares blowing up. thought we addressed that, but maybe we did it in the wrong place. Oh yeah, previous definition. So let's get rid of that one. All right. Yeah, there is no stat function on the Xbox. This is all command line stuff, so I think what I'm going to do here, guys, is if it's not Xbox, just ignore it, because we don't care about command line stuff. This is all command line stuff. I think actually what I'm going to do is just ignore all of this stuff. Yeah, I'm okay with that. All right. So now it's compiled, which is good, but now we have link errors because we have a couple of files that we did not include. The first one was system. So now let's go ahead and put this back in. So all these SDL calls are not going to work. So we have a couple of different options here. We can try to port this to SDL 1.2, or we can just try to replace these with DirectX calls. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to port these to SDL 1.2 calls. So, in order to do that, there's a few things that we want to do first. The first thing I'm going to do is include SDL 1.2 into this project. Now I've got to remember where SDL lives. I think that should be okay. Or is it this way? I always get confused. Let's see if it finds it. It does, okay. Now this is going to well and truly blow up. For now, I'm going to comment every single one of these calls out. Every single one of these calls. and we will come back to these. Yep, well and truly blowing up there. All right. Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a pain. Let's tackle this another way. Let's tackle this another way. Now, one game that I've been porting is Postal. And Postal uses SDL2, and I was successful in getting that working with SDL 1.2. So let's go and take a look at the code for that. If I can remember where it is. Postal. Let's see. Where's Postal? What? Must be Go Postal. Right, okay, so let me open that project up, because I think what I did was let's take a look at this real quick and see what approach we took. So we brought SDL in. That's just the regular 1.2. So yeah, we're just using 1.2 for what we need. Now there's a file in here where it defines SDL, and I believe I want to say it's bdisp. Yep, so this is all the SDL2 calls. All right, let's just leave that over here and refer to it as we need to. So SDL, in fact, I remember I saw a good, there was a good porting guide to go back. So yeah, there's no SDL window, there's an SDL surface. So let's do that first. Oops. Okay. And we have a texture. So we have the texture, that's fine. We don't have the renderer. And I don't know, do we have a pixel format? We do not have a pixel format. So let's throw that in here as well. I don't believe we have a game controller either. Definition. We don't, but we have a joystick, which should be all we really need. Tons of errors. All right, let's figure this out. Thought we had an STL texture. Oh, it's an STL surface. Okay. Yep, STL surface. Wrong. All right, no format, no renderer, no controller. And no window. All right. There's no game controller on the Xbox. So all this stuff here is game controller. All this stuff can go. Yeah, all these events, the controller access motion events. None of these apply. Should clean up a bunch of errors. Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there, guys. We are getting there. Now, one thing you'll notice is I actually haven't even turned my Xbox on yet. So that part comes last. Still joystick name. Joystick. To int. I don't think this really makes any difference. This is all the freeing up of memory. Let's do this for now. I do not recommend that you leave it in this state. What have I done? Oh, end if. All right. So this is where it's copying the buffer to the rectangle. And essentially, it should be pretty straightforward. I have to remember how to do it the old way. update. You blit the texture to the window. So here's our buffer, here's our palette. We're locking the texture as the destination. I think for now, let's ignore this. Let's revisit. What have I done? Map RGB. What did we do for palettes? All right. Scan code. So these are for keyboard presses. Not even something that we're interested in. Build. All right. Let's do this. Okay. So we've cleaned up all our errors, mainly by just commenting out a whole bunch of stubbing out the functions. Now we have link errors. But this is good because all we need to do now is go to our linker and let it know that it needs to link SDL. So in here I'm going to say lib SDL12, I think it's lib SDLX actually. Now it's going to complain that it can't find it, but we will tell it where it is if I remember where to do it. Library directories, so back one, lib SDLX. STL, no, debug, right there. So lib STLX debug. I think that should be okay. Little typo. All right. Unresolved external ini pass and scalar XBR ini pass. So that's probably because of the ini reader file or ini.c. Any pass, there it is right there. So let's go ahead and deal with the any pass error. We'll add that to the project. I cannot find any dot. Okay, let's see if that links it. Okay, that cleans that error up. So the only issue we have is this scalar XBR issue. What I'm going to do is I am going to exclude this, or is excluded, so it's in STL2, so it's complaining about XBR, which is a type of filter, this one right here. Oh, what's it complaining about now? It must be somewhere else. Let's give it the nearest one for what we want. Linking, creating Xbox images, copying files to the Xbox, which I have currently turned off. Now this is obviously not going to work, guys. We don't have any graphics, we don't have anything, but what I'm trying to do here is going to address all the issues with the data files first and get the game actually loading in and reading its data files. And once we get to that point, we can add the graphics back into the game and the sound and the controller. Now if I run this, it's absolutely going to blow up. So what we need to do now is start debugging and understanding why it's not working. Now first things first, we don't have any data files on the Xbox itself, but let's see if we can come up with a couple of quick things we can do to figure out what's causing I think I went too far. All right, let's try that again. So it's complaining about this resource. So as you can see, it's trying to find setup.dat, and the reason why it's blowing up on that is because, first of all, two reasons. We don't have any of the data files on the Xbox's hard disk. So what I mean by that is, if we go to our Xbox neighborhood and look at our active media, there's our XBE, our executable, but there are no other files. So what we need to do now is grab the Heart of Darkness data files and copy them to this folder. That is also not going to work because of a simple reason that I mentioned earlier, that the original Xbox doesn't know anything about relative paths, and this is a relative path. There is no such thing as a current working directory. Everything has to be explicitly defined. So what I mean by that is, this setup.dat file actually needs to be called D:, like this. In fact, every single file has to have the D: prefix. So for this exercise, we are going to do a very similar thing with everything else and put some definitions around this stuff. Now there's going to be more than this as far as files that we need, but this will get past the first piece. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly pause and get my copy of Heart of Darkness off my game shelf and get these data files on my Xbox. So don't go away. We are going to be right back. Alright, so I'm back. I will be honest, I actually did not do any more work in the last part of this. This is the next day, so I just kind of went to bed. But I will show you guys where we left off. And if you recall, we had the Hode X compiling, but we had no data files. I was able to pull down the data files from my original copy of Heart of Darkness, which actually was kind of a pain in the butt to get a hold of, because those files are compressed onto the CD and then you have to install the game in order to get access to the files, which was a bit of a pain because of issues with safe disk and things like that, but I was able to get the files anyway. So let's go into our folder here. I have the Hode data. I believe these are all the files that I need, so I'm going to just dump them in the same folder as the executable, and hopefully this will we'll get further. I don't know if it's going to run the game because we still have issues with file paths and absolute paths that we have to try to address. So we're going to let that copy, and I'm going to load Visual Studio up again while that's doing that. Everything is really slow. I'm just going to let this go. Xbox Neighborhood is not the fastest utility to copy files over to the OG Xbox with, but it's pretty much the most convenient because you just drag your files across. It's just like Windows Explorer at the end of the day. Let's just let this go, I think. This isn't terribly exciting. And this is running in a virtual machine as well. Obviously, this is running Windows XP with my Xbox dev environment, which is the same one I've used for many years, actually. And while this is setting all up or copying these files over, if you are interested in doing original Xbox development, you do not necessarily need a dev kit to do so, but you will need Visual Studio 2003 for your compiler. Unfortunately, there is no open source homebrew compiler yet for the OG Xbox. There is the Open XDK and some other things, but there's really nothing out there that works anywhere near as good as just the official XDK. So if you recall, we had a error here trying to find the file. So let's go ahead and run our code now and see what happens. Hopefully this will get us further. Let's see here. So I was trying to find dcolonsetup.dat, which we know exists, but it's still errored out for some reason. So why did that happen? Let's go ahead and see why that didn't work. Because files count equals 0, so the reason... Well, I'm not sure why files count equals 0. Let's try to figure out what's going on there. What's this files count stuff? Let's go ahead and take a look. It's probably the enumeration of files that it's trying to do, where it actually is add file path. This is probably where it's blowing up. Let's see what it's doing there, or maybe list files. Somewhere it's trying to set the files and it's not succeeding. So you can see list files. So let's step into there. And this was where it's enumerating all the files in our folder. And as you can see, it is just returning nothing. But there is a way in Windows to get a enumeration, which is very similar to this, and I don't remember off the top of my head how to do it, but there is some Win32 command to get a file path and pull back a list of folders. I think it's like get directory or something like that. We have to resort to the document, SDK document, get directory. Let's see here. It's this Win32 file attribute data, file attribute directory. Get file attributes directory. Find first file. Find data. Yeah, this is all coming back to me now. So we have to add a very similar thing to what we have here. And let me see if there's some sample code that I can just pull that will get a directory structure for us. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything. Let's try this. Let's see what it gives us back. Yeah, something like this will work for us. Yeah, let's grab this guy and just we'll work with it. So back to our code. we want to say something like this. We want to find whatever's in D and find the first file. If it's invalid, that's fine. Find the next file, file and close. So we just need to add a similar thing here where we either add the file in the list. So we can say something like this. We don't have any directories. I think it's file attributes. Let's see, file attributes, file attribute directory. So if it's directory, we want to ignore it. So essentially we want to replace this line here and say if this is a directory, then do that. Otherwise, add the file. I think that should be okay. Now, of course, we don't want to add the XBE itself to the file list. So that may be something that we want to take a look at as well. But let's see how this works for now. See if we can build this. File path is undeclared. Let's see. What have I messed up? Too many there. File path. Where is file path? Oh, this thing right here. So we want to add I think that should be correct. See what happens. All right, we're gonna find our files. Okay, there's the XBE. Okay, so it's adding the files to the file list. So let's see what happens now. So this is where it's opening up our setup.dat, and hopefully this time it should say, yep, we have a file count of 29. And there's an assertion error. So what's going on here? Let's expression P, assertion failed. Oh, it's probably something to do with a slash. Not sure why it's complaining about that. Let's see. So in our file list, we would have. So I think maybe what we want to do is just put the absolute path in. So let's go back to our directory listing where we add the paths in. You can see it's adding the folder and the name. So we want to do something similar to that. So let's go ahead and essentially do the same thing where we say, we know the directory is D. Don't need that. That's in file path. And then changes back to file path. Build that. It's still gonna give me an assertion failure, I think, because it's trying to find a / and we don't know anything about a / at all. So let's ignore that for now. Let's just break. Alright. So it's this guy here. So file list, you can see. So I think it's just trying to find a / to assert that it's actually valid. For me, it doesn't really make a difference. So I think what we're going to do is just say if not defined Xbox, then do all this stuff. Else, if you are Xbox, essentially we just want to open this file up. I think that makes sense to me. That looks like... Oh, we need to break though. We need to break out. So let's break. So we found the first file, now we're reading it, and now we're doing a CRC check. Looks like it's loading. Alright, I'm gonna just press F5 and let this go, see what happens. Looks like it's pulling in the files okay. But having said that, we have an error. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, title bitmap data is a bad pointer. So let's go back a little further. Handle title screen. Let's see. This is always the fun part of porting to the OG Xbox. I wonder if this is... unhandled. Yeah, it looks like it's some of the metadata, the header information is not right. I mean, I can see that's the version number it's pulling back, which is clearly not correct. So it goes back to this read uint32 call. I wonder if that needs to be looked at. Maybe it's an Indian thing, or there's some compiler flag that we need to set. Let's take a closer look. Okay. Let's see. So it's pulling back. Let's get a definition. It's pulling back an int. I wonder if that's causing the problem. Because it probably thinks... Well, I'm not really sure what it thinks. Just for giggles. Let's try... It's not what I wanted. Let me close. One of the other things about early Visual Studio is you don't have a close all tabs. You just got to do it one at a time. Sometimes I like to close tabs because I have so many of them open at the same time. I get a little confused, a little lost. All right. So that's reading 4 bytes. Let's go back further. Load menu buffers. Guess the other thing it could be doing is reading from the wrong offset. We don't necessarily know if there's any debug. I know that there's a warning function. It was called warning, but it didn't seem like it did anything. So let's do this and say if def xbox else, and if we'll say output debug string debug. So now we'll actually see any debug that comes through. I wonder if there's something beforehand that's causing it to blow up. You can see there it's complaining unhandled.dat version. So that's the root cause there. So let's find out where that's coming from. Unhandled dat version, which is this one right here. So there's the buffer. So if we take a look at this in memory, viewer. Yeah, this is very strange. I guess one thing I haven't tested yet is whether this actually works on the Windows version, the data files that I have. I mean, I expect it does, but I've never actually tested it. So let's go ahead and do that. See if this actually works on the Windows version. Alright, so I know what the problem is, guys. I took a little bit of a break just to clear my head, and I understand what's going on. So let's kind of walk through the issue. So if we take a look at the executable again, let's go ahead and run it and just walk through what the deal is. So as you can see, we're loading the setup.dat file right there, and it's complaining that it's an unhandled version, so it's not matching version 10 or 11. We're getting these like just super long numbers, which obviously is incorrect. Now I thought maybe there was some type of endian issue with the code or something, but that's not actually what's happening here at all. So what we know is that if we load this setup.dat file and we read the first 4 bytes of this file, which is what this is telling us right here, we're reading 4 bytes from the dat file, then we should get a value back of either 10 or 11, otherwise the version is incorrect. Now let's go ahead and find our setup.dat file and open it up in a hex editor. And as you can see, the first 4 bytes is A0000. Now, A in hexadecimal is the value of 10. So going back to our code, if we go back to where I just was, and I've just lost where I was in the call stack. It's a disassembly, I don't want that. You can see that 10 is a valid version that it's looking for. So why are we getting this number? The reason why we're getting this number is simply because the code that we previously were working on, where we were opening these files, is incorrect. Now, I went a little bit too far ahead here, because essentially what this is doing is saying For each file in the file count in this list of array, open up I. Now the problem is I is always going to be the first file in the list, which is not the file that we want. This piece of code here is doing a case compare to see if the file name that's being passed in matches this file here. So we need to do something similar on the Xbox side. So essentially, I think what I need to do is change it from backslash to forward slash and do pretty much the same thing. Now, I'm probably gonna need to test this just to make sure it works. But you can see it's essentially just comparing what's being passed in with the list of files in the array. And once it finds the correct one, which is the I index, then it opens it up and returns the file pointer. What we were doing was essentially opening the first file every single time, which who knows what that was. And that means it was opening the incorrect file, and it was obviously returning an incorrect value. So you can see here that it should be trying to find a match. It doesn't, and that is probably because this comparison code is not quite right. What we need to do is, I think we need to do something like this, although that's not going to work because it's a string char. I think what I'm going to do for now is just keep this really simple. Really simple. And rather than say we're going to open up a file list, we're just going to open up name, which I think should work for us. Let's see if that works. Because they should be coming in with the D colon appended to the file name. So that one's okay. Yeah, the problem is that one is not. So I think that's where it gets a little confusing. So what we can do, however, is this. When we build the list of files in our collection, which I believe was in the file IO function, I think, where we do the directory load. Actually, it's probably in here. We append D to that file. So that looks like it's doing what it's supposed to. Let's see here. I see what's going on. We just want to do we want to see if we can find a match. So, okay, so let's try this. So for each file in file count, why don't we just say so we just need to add a simple string compare here or something, just to match the file that's coming in with one that's in the folder. So let's compare name with P. I think it's +2, I want to say. I think that should be okay. And then grab this and then break out. Let's see here. Right. P plus 1. And P plus 1's correct. I think if we make both of these lowercase, it should be okay. See if that works. Didn't like that too much. Let's see here. Yeah, the problem is you can already tell that you've got name, and then you've got P plus 1 coming in. It's never going to match because the case is not correct. Let's see if that makes a difference. Yeah, this isn't gonna work. So, let's maybe think about this another way. Let's see. I think I've got another way of doing this. I think what I'm gonna do is make this really simple. So this is the file it's trying to open. This file may or may not have D appended to it. No, it's always going to have D appended to it. It depends on what's in the file list. No, it's the other way around. The file list will have D appended to it. What's coming in won't have D, may not have D appended to it. So let's always assume that it does have D appended to it. So in order to do that, let's go back to main. And I just realized my webcam isn't on. Okay, so once again, I took a little bit of a break to understand what was going on, and the problem is this. So when we pass in a file, let's say it is setup.dat or one of the level files like rock_hod.level, the file that's coming in doesn't have the D extension appended to it. But the file in the file list does. So this comparison will never get made, therefore the file will never open. So we want a smarter way for the file that's coming in to just work. Now, what I could do is append D to the name, which I think is what I'm going to do. I think that's probably the right way to do it, because then we can use our string compare, which is not case sensitive, and it should match what we have. But then this function should also work too. So let's try this for a second. Before we proceed, I wonder if it has to do with the fact that we appended D: to those files in the global variables, which I believe was, I lost it now, where are they? Maybe it's in game. Let's go back. So these files, I feel like we should just change them back to where they were. And then what we can do is append D to them inside the function here. So in other words, it should match, and then it's going to try open them, but it's going to fail because it doesn't have D appended. So let's see if that piece works. As you can see, it does. So it's trying to open setup.dat. So essentially what I'm going to do, and call it Xbox name, and I'm just going to say and then open up Xbox name. It should, hopefully, oh, it's lowercase s. So there's setup.dat. That opens. There's the path file, which opens. Now this is our header file from before. Let's see what happens now. What's the version we get back? There you go, version 10, which means it is doing the right thing. Let's see about this. That's version 6, so that's good. So I think we're in good shape now. With any luck, if we go to our SDL file and go to one of these render functions that we commented out or we stubbed out, we should be hitting breakpoints where it's trying to render the screen. Right there, so that's the update screen function. As you can see, it is hitting the update screen function, which means the code, excuse me, which means the code appears to be running. So now the next thing we need to do is get the rendering to work. Remember, we ended up commenting out all this stuff, but now it's really just a matter of getting it all included back in. So let's go ahead and do that now. But before I do that, I'm going to turn this music down a little bit. A little distracting. So yeah, the game is now running. We just can't see anything that's happening on the screen. But everything seems to be looking good. So now let's go to the init function. This is where it's initializing SDL. So we're getting looking good there. Number of joysticks, we should have 4, yes. And then it should open the joysticks. There it is. So you can see it's Xbox SDL gamepad. The audio. And the main game loop. All right, so now the texture. What was the name of our... What's the name of our STL surface that we created? Where is it? Right there. That guy there. Is that right? Pixels? I believe that's right. Zero. Okay, so we haven't created these surfaces, so we need to create the surface. Porting STL2 to STL 1.2. So what we need to do is create texture from surface. So the first thing we need to do is set the video mode. Go back to our init. So the screen is the screen is the screen. So that works. Okay. Most of this stuff isn't really anything that we need. We'll try to figure out the widescreen texture thing later. Let's just get this to work for now. So we can say texture Oh, let's see. That's not what I want. So there's your screen, there's the new one. STL surface. Let me take a look and see what I did again for... What did I do for Postal Open Project? Create RGB surface. Okay. Getting closer. There's our screen. There's our texture. There's our destination. Still don't have our pitch because it doesn't know anything about our pitch. But what we can do is say I think that's valid. It is. Okay. Okay. All right. Back to Postal. Let's try that. Sorry, let's try Blit. to STL. So we want to blit texture, screen, and then flip the screen, I think. Okay, I haven't actually hooked up a display yet, but let's, for giggles, do a surface viewer. Yep, looks like it's a looks like it's a blank screen. All right, let's do this. Let's bring in the display. Just bear with me for a sec, guys. All right. Direct TV. What's going on? All right, let's try this. Let's add, I'm just in OBS here, video capture, blah, 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 new one, and then let's grab the analog capture. Oh, for some reason it's not bringing my Xbox capture in. I'm gonna pause real quick and come right back and figure out what's going on. Okay, I just had to get my capture working for my dev kit so you can actually see what's going on here. So now, if we start this up, we can actually see some output on the top right there. So let's see what happens now. If this thing actually does anything. Now I suspect the reason why it's coming out as a blank screen is because of the color palette. And I need to remember what you need to do for STL 1.2 in order to set the color palette. Set colors. I think it was set colors. That sounds about right to me. So somewhere in here, we're setting the color palette right there. Map RGB. So what is this doing? Let's try this. Unused. Oh, that's a structure. It's not the same thing. Oh, it does have SDL map RGB. So what's the issue? Why does this not work? It's probably because of the format doesn't know anything about that. Let's see what it tries to do. Aha, it doesn't know anything about the format. So what is the format? Alloc format. SDL pixel format. So we get the format from the surface. So essentially what we need to do is I think that's right. Except that's not right. And would you look at that? We have a intro screen. Success. That is a great start. So now we obviously need to make sure that the game is working, the controls are working, and the sound is working. Right now we have no audio. So we will need to deal with that next. In fact, I'm not really sure how audio is done. audio. Okay, so start audio. The audio should actually work. I guess what I can do is stop the background music, and let's see if there's actually any audio that's going on here. I'm going to plug in a controller into my Xbox and see if we can actually register any type of controls. And we get absolutely nothing. Kind of expected that, I guess. We're definitely getting audio coming through the Xbox there. So let's go back to the SDL and see what's being mapped as far as controls. I wonder if it's just something simple. It's definitely registering key presses, which is good. But this update keys is all commented out, so nothing is being registered. So I think all we need to do is say else is this, because we don't care about anything other than the pad mask. That should, I think, register our joystick. It does. Okay, let's see if we can play. Look at that. Now there's some issues with the texture being cut off there. We can fix that. Can hear the audio coming through. Let's just turn that up a little bit. Beautiful. Wish I could skip this though. This is such a great game too. I'm so glad I took the time to port this to the original Xbox. I think the fans are really going to like it. And once this port is done, we are going to release this to the public. This is why I decided that I would just port the existing SDL code rather than rewrite the DirectX code. Alright, let's pause this for now. Now you can see here we're getting these sound underruns, probably because we're in a debug version. Once we cut over to release and link it with a release SDL lib and the release libraries, it will run a lot faster. Alright, I'm back. So I took a little break again. When you're porting something or you're working on coding, it's important to take frequent breaks, trust me. If you don't, you're just going to get burnt out, get tired. Taking a break is very important in my opinion. Just keeps the mind refreshed and it keeps you thinking about what your next move is when it comes to this stuff. Writing code is difficult, porting is tricky, so you really have to make sure you get your head in the right place. Now, where did we leave where we were before? Let's just revisit. And we had pretty much the game running. First of all, I'm gonna deal with this music because it is way too busy for me right now. That sounds a lot better. Okay, so a couple of things are going on here. The first one is the textures were not correct. So what I mean by that is if we go to our surface viewer and set a breakpoint, you can see that our texture has been kind of truncated. If we look at texture 0, that's the actual texture itself. So this could be, well, the texture is 640 by 480, which is not correct, and that's part of the problem that we have. So let's go back to the texture initialization piece, and I'm going to change this music again. In fact, let's just skip a little. That's way better. All right. All right. Where am I? So let's see what kind of texture it's creating as far as dimensions. And why did not that? Oh, that's the wrong code. Okay, let's go down here. So the texture is 768 by 576, and we're setting a 640 by 480 screen mode. Let's see what happens if we try this. Let's go ahead and take a look at our texture now. If we go to pause and then look at our Surface viewer, you can see that's correct. I think that should give us what we need. It should force the cutscenes to skip if we're in debug mode. But it didn't hit that. Probably because I need to define debug somewhere in my preprocessor. It's this underscore debug. See if that works. Okay, debug has hit. Let's see what happens now if I play. There we go. Alright, we're in the game. Alright, let me kill the background music. And then let's give this a quick run through. Oh. The controls are working. I'm not big on the button layout. Right now you have to hold down the A button to run, and then jump is the B button. I'm wondering if we make the right trigger run. It seems a lot more intuitive to me. And this game is so cool. man, this is tough. I don't remember this being this tough. But it's looking good. Oh, man. Now, I wonder how you can save your game. All right. Let's stop that for a second. Let's figure out this widescreen stuff. Widescreen texture. Where is it complaining? Right there.